The day my mother looked at my crying daughter and said, "She can use the school computers," I realized I wasn't just dealing with a thief. I was dealing with a family that had decided my child mattered less than my brother's mistakes. My name is Daniel. I'm 39, a single father, and my 14-year-old daughter, Maya, is the best thing that's ever happened to me. She's quiet, hardworking, and the kind of kid who thanks cashiers when they hand her a receipt. She doesn't ask for expensive gifts or complain when life isn't fair. That's probably why what happened still keeps me awake at night. For nearly 2 years, Maya had been saving every dollar she received. Birthday money from grandparents, holiday cards with $20 bills tucked inside, babysitting money from our neighbors. She put every cent into a small envelope she kept in her desk drawer. She had one dream: a laptop powerful enough for school, digital art, and the coding classes she'd recently fallen in love with. I promised her that if she kept saving, I'd cover the rest. When her birthday finally arrived, we walked into the electronics store together. Watching her face light up as the employee placed the silver laptop on the counter was worth every extra shift I'd worked. "It really belongs to me," she whispered. I smiled. "You earned it." For the next 3 weeks, that laptop never left her room unless she was working at the kitchen table beside me. She filled it with artwork, homework, and little animation projects she hoped would someday become a career. Then everything changed. One Friday afternoon, I came home from work to find Maya standing at the top of the stairs with tears in her eyes. "Dad," my stomach dropped. "What happened?" "My laptop's gone." At first, I thought she'd misplaced it. We searched her room, the living room, the kitchen, every closet. Nothing. Then I noticed the back door wasn't completely closed. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Only a handful of people had ever been inside our house without us. One of them was my younger brother, Eric. I grabbed my phone and called him. "Hey," I said as calmly as I could. "Did you stop by today?" There was a pause just long enough to make my heart sink. "Yeah," he finally answered. "Mom asked me to pick up a box she left in your garage." I looked around the room again. "Maya's laptop disappeared while you were here." Another pause. Then he laughed. "You seriously think I stole a kid's computer?" At that moment, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe my own brother couldn't sink that low. I had no idea that within a few hours, I'd discover not only that he'd stolen it, but that my own mother would defend him while my daughter sat there crying. If you'd asked anyone outside our family who the responsible one was, they would have pointed to me without hesitation. I paid my bills on time, worked full-time as an operations manager, kept a modest home, and raised Maya on my own after her mother passed away when Maya was 6. Life hadn't been easy, but every decision I made revolved around giving my daughter the stability she deserved. Eric's life looked very different. At 35, he'd bounced from one job to another, rarely staying anywhere longer than a few months. Whenever rent was due, his car needed repairs, or another unpaid bill caught up with him, someone else stepped in, usually our mother. She always had an explanation. "He's just had bad luck. He's under a lot of stress. He'll get back on his feet." Those promises had been repeated for nearly 15 years. They never came true. Growing up, the difference between us was impossible to ignore. When I earned good grades, Mom told me that was simply what she expected. When Eric barely passed a class, she celebrated by taking him out for dinner. If I wanted something, I was told to save my money. If Eric wanted something, somehow Mom found a way to pay for it. As adults, nothing changed. When I bought my first home, she criticized me for being too careful with money. When Eric was evicted from his apartment after missing months of rent, she blamed his landlord for being heartless. The pattern became so predictable that I eventually stopped arguing. I focused on my own life, limited family visits, and kept my finances private because every conversation somehow ended with someone suggesting I should help your brother just this once. There was always a next time. A few $100s here, a missed utility bill there, a security deposit, a car payment, a loan that was never repaid. Every excuse came wrapped in the same sentence. Family takes care of family. What that really meant was that I was expected to sacrifice while Eric avoided consequences. The only reason I'd continued allowing him into my home was because Maya adored her uncle. Whenever he visited, he'd joke with her, ask about her artwork, and act like the fun relative who had everything under control. Looking back, I realize I confused charm with character. The day Maya's laptop disappeared, I wasn't just confronting a theft. I was confronting decades of excuses, favoritism, and manipulation that had taught my brother he could take whatever he wanted because someone else would always protect him. I just never imagined that someone would expect my daughter to pay the price for it. Driving home that afternoon, the silence in the car was almost unbearable. Maya sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, twisting the zipper on her backpack over and over. She didn't complain or cry anymore. Somehow, that hurt even more. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry you worked so hard for nothing." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "You have nothing to apologize for." "But if I hadn't wanted that laptop." I interrupted her before she could finish. "This isn't your fault. Someone made a choice to steal from you." When we got home, her desk looked strangely empty. The outline where the laptop had rested was still visible, along with a stack of sketchbooks and a notebook filled with coding exercises. Months of work suddenly felt interrupted, and I could see her wondering whether she'd ever get back what she'd lost. That evening, after Maya went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a folder of receipts, warranty papers, and old emails from when I'd bought the laptop. Looking through them reminded me how much effort had gone into giving her that gift. There hadn't been spare money lying around. I'd worked overtime for months, skipped vacations, repaired things around the house instead of replacing them, and postponed buying myself a newer car. Every extra dollar had gone toward making sure Maya had opportunities one never had growing up. None of those sacrifices felt wasted. If anything, they reminded me why I couldn't let this go. For years I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace whenever my brother made another irresponsible decision and my mother rushed to defend him. I convinced myself that avoiding conflict made life easier. It didn't. It only taught them that there would never be consequences. As I organized every document into a neat folder, my frustration slowly turned into determination. I wasn't preparing for an argument anymore. I was preparing to protect my daughter. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. The cycle of excuses in my family was ending with me. The next morning, my phone started vibrating before I'd even poured my first cup of coffee. "Mom." I let it ring. Then Eric. I ignored that too. Within 15 minutes, I'd missed 12 calls and received more than 30 text messages from different relatives. "What are you doing? Call your mother. Eric made a mistake. Don't ruin his life. **** family shouldn't involve the police." Not one message asked how Maya was doing. Not one person asked whether she had her laptop back. The only concern was protecting the man who had stolen from a 14-year-old girl. Around noon, Mom showed up at my front door without calling. The moment I opened it, she walked inside as though nothing had happened. "You need to fix this," she said. "I didn't create this situation. You called the police on your own brother." "No," I replied calmly. "Eric stole from my daughter." She sighed dramatically. "He was desperate. People do foolish things when they're scared, and children are supposed to pay for that." Her expression hardened. "If you don't withdraw the report, he'll lose everything." I looked toward the living room where Maya was quietly reading a library book she'd checked out because she no longer had her laptop. He should have thought about that before he pawned his niece's birthday gift. Mom tried a different approach. "Think about the family." "I am." "No, you're thinking about yourself." I shook my head. "I'm thinking about my daughter, the only innocent person in this." She left without another word. Less than an hour later, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed the local police department. The officer informed me that they had located Eric and wanted me to come in with the purchase receipt, serial number, and warranty information to verify ownership of the laptop. For the first time since Maya discovered it was missing, I felt a small sense of hope. The truth was finally catching up with my brother, and no amount of family pressure could change the evidence. The following afternoon, I walked into the police station carrying a folder that contained everything the officers had requested. The original purchase receipt, the laptop's serial number, the warranty registration, and printed screenshots of the text messages Eric had sent after I confronted him. An investigator greeted me and led me into a small interview room. "We've already spoken with the pawn shop," he said. "They kept detailed records." He placed several documents on the table. There was the pawn ticket, a photocopy of Eric's driver's license, his signature, the exact serial number from Maya's laptop. Every piece matched perfectly. There was no misunderstanding, no mix-up, no way to claim he'd accidentally taken the wrong computer. The investigator then showed me still images from the pawn shop security cameras. The footage clearly captured Eric walking through the front door, carrying Maya's laptop case, before completing the transaction at the counter. Minutes later, another officer entered the room. "We've also spoken with your neighbor." The neighbor confirmed seeing Eric leave my house carrying the laptop case only minutes before driving away. The timeline lined up exactly. When officers questioned Eric, he initially insisted he'd only borrowed the laptop and intended to buy it back after getting paid. But the text messages told a different story. One of them simply read, "I needed rent money. I was going to replace it later." That admission ended any remaining doubt. Later that evening, several relatives gathered at my mother's house, convinced they could pressure me into changing my mind. Instead, the investigator calmly explained that the evidence didn't depend on whether I forgave Eric. The security footage, pawn records, witness statement, and ownership documents spoke for themselves. The room fell silent. For the first time in years, no one defended Eric. Even my mother struggled to argue with facts she could see laid out in front of her. As I prepared to leave, the investigator handed me one final document confirming that the laptop would be released back to me once the evidence process was complete. Walking out of the station, I realized something that had nothing to do with police reports or paperwork. Real accountability had finally entered my family's story. Not because anyone wanted it to, but because the truth had become impossible to ignore. 2 days later, Maya carried her laptop back into the house with the same careful smile she'd worn the day we bought it. She set it on her desk, opened it, and sighed with relief when every project, drawing, and assignment was still there. Then she wrapped her arms around me. "Thanks for believing me, Dad." Those 5 words meant more than any apology I would ever receive. Over the next few weeks, Eric accepted responsibility through the legal process, paid restitution, and was ordered to complete community service. The consequences weren't about revenge, they were about accountability. For the first time in his adult life, someone couldn't simply excuse his choices away. Mom called several times after that. The first few conversations were filled with the same arguments I'd heard for years. "He's still your brother. Families should forgive. You've embarrassed everyone." But as the weeks passed, her tone changed. One afternoon, she quietly admitted, "Maybe I spent so many years protecting Eric that I stopped seeing who was getting hurt." It wasn't a perfect apology, and it couldn't erase what Maya had experienced, but it was the first honest thing I'd heard from her in a long time. I told her the truth. "I hope Eric turns his life around. I really do. But protecting my daughter will never be something I apologize for." Our relationship never returned to what it once was, and I accepted that. Some distance isn't created by anger. It exists because trust has been broken too many times. Life gradually settled into a new rhythm. Maya returned to her artwork and coding projects with even more confidence than before. Watching her laugh again reminded me that peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from standing up for the people who depend on you. Looking back, I don't remember the police report or the family arguments as much as I remember one simple choice. The day my family asked me to protect the person who stole from my child, I chose my daughter instead. And I'd make that same choice every single time.